Now let's take a look at one of the other major new features in FlyQ EFB 3.0, and that's the data recording feature and some other things that go along with the data recorder. On the flight data recorder, first of all, it is automatic. You can do it manually if you like, but by default, FlyQ EFB senses when you begin flying and senses when you stop flying and just automatically records the flight. You don't have to tell it to do it. Specifically, it looks for moving faster than about 45 knots to begin and going slower than about 20 knots for a few seconds to think that you landed. So you can manually start and stop it, but by default, it's all automatic. Now, so let's say we're flying along here. I just moved the icon back to the center of the screen. If you take a look at the upper right corner of the screen, there are 5 status indicators, where in the previous release of the product there were 4. The 5th one, which is at the very far right-hand side of the screen, says REC, recording. It's telling you that right now recording is in progress. One of the things that you can do when recording is in progress is take advantage of a new map layer. Let me hit the stack of papers icon on the left side of the screen. And I'll hit flight track. This is the very last item on the right-hand side of that pop-up. It says flight track. Turn that on. And notice that there's now a green line behind our plane. What's interesting about the green line is it didn't start just when I hit the flight track feature. It started earlier. That's actually when the recording began. So the flight tracks are there whether or not you decide to display them. Like I can tap this again, turn off the flight track, turn it back on again, and it's there. So turning on and off the flight track layer doesn't do anything about clearing the track. It's still on the screen because the flight track itself is determined by the recording. Okay, so now we're showing it. Great. So we're flying along. You see on the track. You can zoom in. You can make it track up if you like this. Hit this again, and it becomes north up, and so on. So that's the track recording. You can do this in split screen. You can do something like where you can turn the flight track on one side and maybe on the left-hand side of the screen, turn it to airports or to something else, scratch pad. You can write some note, whatever you like, okay? So you can do this in split screen mode as well as single. Let me go back to single screen by hitting the split screen button on the upper left corner of the screen. And then just flick it back to map. Okay, so now it looks like we're flying around Roche Harbor, which is, by the way, a fantastic place to fly in. Mildly terrifying the first time you do it. The runway actually tilts downhill, so you kind of think that you're about to fall off the end of the world, when in fact the runway continues. It just doesn't look like it. Anyway, really, really pretty area. So we're flying along. That's how the flight track works. If you tap on any of the status indicators on the upper right corner of the screen, again, you've got your GPS, and your weather, and your ADS-B, but also now you're the flight data recorder. So the main, which is to say left side of the flight data recorder area, now says recording status on, and duration counts up. So we're at 4 minutes, 5 seconds, 6 seconds, 7 seconds, and so on. When that's selected on the right-hand side, it gives you a manual option to stop the recording, or start if it's not starting. And then a little indicator light there telling you that the recording is currently in progress. Okay. What you see after that, though, are a number of other recordings which we've done previously. So it looks like there's only one so far. But let me try this. I'm going to now stop this. So I'm going to stop my flight track recording. And when I do that, I have the new recording here is telling me that this was an afternoon flight on today, and it estimates where I began, which it's saying S31, and where I ended, W39. All of that's there. It says that this is a 9 nautical mile flight lasting 4 minutes, 37 seconds. This is the flight that we took earlier. Okay. Now right now, you notice that there's no icon associated with this. The reason why there's no graphical image associated with the flight is because we haven't landed yet, as it were. So it hasn't been able to update that graphical image from the server. But let me show you how this works. If I want to edit some of this, I can do that. On this flight, if I don't want to call it afternoon flight, if I want to call it something else, I can click the blue edit button. So what do we want to call this? I'm just going to call this afternoon flight to Friday Harbor, like that. And I'm going to say I can add an optional description in here too. So I'm going to add lunch with John, something like that. And if we really took off from somewhere else, if it guessed wrong, I can type in, let's say that we took off from Payne Field and we went to Friday Harbor. Doesn't really matter. You can call it anything you like. It doesn't have to be the ident to the airport. We figure it out. And you click done. Okay? So the duration and the distance are still there. When we go offline, or rather when we go online and reconnect to the internet, then the system will generate a graphical image like this flight. Okay, so now we're back home, we're done with the flight, and we want to take a look at the flight. We want to do something with it. Well, how do we do that? It's pretty easy. You go to that status indicator panel on the upper right-hand side of the screen, tap any of the buttons, doesn't matter which, and then select the flight data recorder. On the flight data recording, it shows you some flights that it's taken. So here's one they took. Here's the one that we did a little while ago, the afternoon flight to Friday Harbor, lunch with John. This is the flight that we were looking at. Notice that towards the bottom of that graphic, there's a green dot, and towards the top of it, there's a red dot. So the green, of course, shows you the beginning of the flight, and the red shows you the ending of the flight. If I want to just see that track on the display, it's really simple. I simply tap on the graphic, anywhere on the graphic itself. So now we see what that flight track looks like on our screen. But if we want to play it, actually see what it's like to fly it, we can do that as well. Again, you tap anywhere on the status indicators buttons on the top. Let's go down to the correct flight, which is the afternoon flight to Friday Harbor with John. And I will hit the play button. There's a blue play button right below the title. So I'll click that. And now you see the aircraft. Let me center the aircraft. Now the aircraft is superimposed on the flight track line. Since this is FlyQ EFB, and FlyQ EFB already had a built-in GPS simulator, this means we can also take advantage of those features and play it back faster or from particular spots within the flight. Again, do that by tapping anywhere on the status indicators, this time moving to the GPS panel, which also doubles as our simulator, and I can move the flight. Notice that there's a speed control slider, and below that a position on route slider. I can move my position on the route to any place I like. So now we're a lot further along. I can move the position back, but maybe make my speed faster. So we can fly along like that. Okay? So lots of interesting ways that you can take a look at your flight with the built-in GPS simulator. That, by the way, works in 3D as well. So if I flip my map type to 3D, this same kind of system works. So now we're flying along in 3D mode. I can split my screen, and so on. Okay, so right now within the app, this is pretty cool. You can do a 2D simulation, a 3D simulation, all of it from within the built-in simulator by using an existing flight track. Okay, let's go back to single screen, and we'll go back to our 2D view. Okay, so in addition to looking at and playing back a flight like we're doing right now, you can also do things like send it to people through Twitter or Facebook, or send them an image by email. Let me show you what I mean. In the upper right corner of the screen, again, you tap on any of the 5 status indicators. And notice that there's a little button up top that looks like a box with an arrow coming out. That's your action button. You can use that for a lot of things. First thing is, this particular one here is a flight that I really don't want to keep, so I want to delete that. I'm going to click the button there and then say delete. Confirm they want to delete it. Great. Now here's a flight that we were looking at before. This is the lunch flight with John. So I'm going to just stop playing that by hitting the pause button. And now I want to send this to, say, Facebook. It's a really cool flight. I want to tell people about the restaurant we went to, whatever it may be. So I'll hit that action button, and I'll say share the image. And you can send it to as a message, you can send it as mail, Facebook, Twitter, whatever you have installed. That list is dependent upon what apps you have installed in your own iPad or iPhone. So I'm just going to click Facebook. And right here, let me get rid of the keyboard for a second so you can see what it is. You get a graphical representation that shows you that you had an 11 nautical mile flight, 5 minutes, and showing you what your average speed was and what your maximum altitude was. I can say something like, amazing $100 hamburger lunch flight with John. Okay? Now, by the way, I can just post this by hitting the post button in the upper right corner, but minor point here, where it says Steve Podracic, if I hit that line up there, it actually, if you're a member of various groups, you can post to one or more a group. So I can hit my group button and I can post this into, say, flights above the Pacific Northwest. So then when you want to post it, you just select whatever group you want, flights above the Pacific Northwest, hit done, and when I hit post, poof, here it's going to go. Now it's posted. And just to show you that this really did work, let's pull up Facebook. And here's my Facebook posting. Right there, right on my Facebook page. Okay? So people can comment on it, very easy to share. Even a non-pilot can understand a graphical representation like this. Okay? So let's go back to FlyQ. What else can you do with it? One of the most common requests we get with a recorded flight is to do something with it in terms of analysis. Again, you can play back the flight within FlyQ EFB itself, but typically what you want to do is you want to use a service like Cloud Ahoy, maybe Google Earth, something like that to play it back. So now I'm going to hit the button that, again, look, the action button, which is the box with the arrow coming out. And instead of saying share image, I will say share GPX. What's GPX? GPX is a data format file which is used by a lot of different applications. It's an open source format, commonly used. And again, if I had Cloud Ahoy, Google Earth, something like that listed here, it would allow me to do that. I can post it directly to my Cloud Ahoy file and use it. In fact, let's see what that looks like. I'll load in that file on my Cloud Ahoy account on my Mac, and I'll show you what it looks like. So let's take a look. It'll be loading a flight. This actually technically isn't the flight that I showed on the iPad, but it's another flight that we took similarly. Right now, you have the ability, there's a little play button here. I'm sure many of you know how to use Cloud Ahoy a lot better than I do. But as you can see, this gives us the ability to play flights, to move it along, to begin at certain points, zoom into certain points, and so on. Move it along, you can move it out. Looks like it's using Google Maps as a base map for the flight, and so on. So you can do quite a lot of analysis on this. You can move it at 1x, 2x, 3, 4x, that kind of thing on the flight. You can also, with the viewing option, this of course is a really cool thing. You can do 3D track. On here. Takes it a second for Cloud Ahoy, I think, to stabilize. But here comes the images loading into Google Earth. Move it around. You see a 3D wall, as it were, representing our flight. You can do a cockpit video like that. This is pretty cool. Hopefully I was flying a little bit more stable than that, but you get the idea. So there's a lot of different ways that you can debrief it, and all that you had to do this in FlyQ EFB is click a button from any flight that you've recorded and say send to GPX. You can send it by email, or you can immediately post it to the Cloud Ahoy app if you have that installed on your iPad or your iPhone. It's just that simple. So there you go, using an external application like Cloud Ahoy with FlyQ EFB.